I'm joined now by Danny Shaw, policing crime and justice commentator. Good morning to you, Danny.
Morning, Julia. Hi.
Thanks for joining us. I just want to ask you, really, just first of all, linking to what we've just been talking about with Donald Trump, this policy of, well, you know, if you don't take back your migrants, then we're going to impose tariffs on you. A lot of people are saying, oh, actually, this sounds like a good idea. Why doesn't Britain do that when it comes to either returning migrants from many other countries, like Pakistan and others who often won't accept, or indeed returning boat migrants to France? What do you make of that? Could we do it?
Well, I think there is a way of doing something similar, which is, you know, you have agreements with countries that they accept people, and in return, for example, you know, the UK makes it easier for people who want to come here legally to get visas. I think that kind of soft power has existed in the past.
Yeah.
And it requires negotiation and diplomacy between the two countries. OK, we've got a bunch of foreign criminals. We need to get them back to your country. You accept them. And, you know, in return, if, you know, we'll make the visa regime a bit easier for you so that people who have skills can come to the UK.
Although I've always wondered why it's in the interest of a lot of these countries to ship off their brightest and their best to another country.
Well, because some people from those countries want to come to the UK. I mean, that's the reality. And there are some skilled workers that we need. So I think there are some sort of arrangements, some agreements that can be struck. I don't think we're in a position to impose tariffs on particular countries. I just don't think that's the way that we operate. You know, I'm not an expert on trade and tariffs.
Well, we don't have quite the economic might that the US has vis-a-vis Colombia. It's interesting in terms of, you know, smashing the gangs. That more than 8,000 social media accounts linked to people smuggling were taken down following referrals from the National Crime Agency here in the last year. This has been confirmed in the last day. That's 40% up on the removals in 2023. Now, we know, again, a lot of this stuff is marketed online. Look, you know, come to Britain. This is all it costs. You know, this is where you get the boats. I mean, people are often told, you know, this land of milk and honey and the benefits they'll get and how safe and easy the ride is. Often told horrific lies in those cases. But surely every single social media account that is cut down, taken down, is just replaced by two more, isn't it?
It is. It's a game of cat and mouse, but it's one way of disrupting the gangs. You know, you can't not do it. I think it's something that has to be done. But of course, it's not the only answer, Julia. We know that there are so many different approaches that have to be taken. But clearly, if it makes it more difficult for the gangs to reach out to potential clients, then that's a good thing. If it disrupts or prolongs, you know, their activities and makes it harder for them to do what they need to do, then it's necessary. And it's good that the National Crime Agency is now working with the tech companies to do that, because some of these adverts are just brazen. Some of them are lies. I think one is talking about, oh, if you go across, you'll get a speedboat to take you across.
Yeah.
The other one is offering fake ID. So, you know, it's one small brick in the wall against these gangs, I suppose.
I wonder whether that's going to be enough. It should be done, but it's not necessarily sufficient on its own, is it? Let's talk about what is happening on our streets, though. And particularly, goodness me, in the wake of the horrific Southport attack, details being exposed in court during the sentencing at Liverpool Crown Court last Thursday. I say we you know, there wasn't a dry eye in the house here, and I don't know any parent who wasn't just absolutely shaken to their core by the details of that horrific crime carried out by Iraq's or Uda Kubana. Government still talking about, you know, we need to cut down on people being able to buy knives online and double ID and the like, and an awful lot of people are saying, for goodness sake, you can just go to your parents' kitchen and get a knife out. And yet we've got some stats out saying that teenagers are getting away with knife crime in London because fewer police officers feel confident using stop and search in case a complaint derails their career. This is actually from Commander Hayley Stewart, who leads on tackling knife crime in the Met, and said it's a top priority. She says, but the falls in the number of arrests for knife crimes are linked to fewer officers feeling confident because they fear complaints. Because, you know, even with body cam, you'd think that would take away from a lot of that risk. I mean, how concerned are you about that?
I'm very concerned about that. And Sir Mark Rowley, the Met Commissioner, has talked about the fact that his officers are worried about using their powers, stop and search and other measures as well, because of the scrutiny they get, because of the complaints they'll get. You know, if they are investigated, it could take months or even years.
Yeah.
That's a terrible thing to sort of hang over someone's career. So that's a real concern, and the impact you can see now: fewer stops and searches,
Yeah.
fewer arrests, fewer knives potentially being taken off the streets. I mean, stop and search is just one tactic. It can be an effective tactic if it's targeted. It's not an effective tactic if it's used too widely and too broadly, because then what it does is just alienates a group of people who are particularly subject to
and it is all very well, white middle class women saying, oh, we should have more stop and search. Well, if it's not happening to you, I've done phone-ins before where, largely black and Asian men for saying, look, when you're stopped, every week, you're going to start feeling resentful if you're a law-abiding citizen. But I don't know what the alternative is. I mean, certainly in London, knife crime, you only have to look at, just literally, do a front page of the Evening Standard. Who are the victims of knife crime? Who are the people convicted? And we are largely talking about young black boys killing young black boys. Of course, the people who are most likely to be searched for knives are going to be young black men, young black boys.
It disproportionately affects the black community, not just with perpetrators, but also with victims as well.
Yeah, but there's no point searching, 56-year-old white women. We're not carrying knives. And then everyone says, oh, it's targeted. Well, yeah, of course it's targeted.
It's got to be targeted at the right people, and that involves intelligence, and then it's got to be done really, really respectfully by police.
100%. Yeah, there's a way of doing it, absolutely.
But it's just one thing. I mean, what I'm really concerned about is when someone is found with a knife, what happens? Yeah. And I think that is a teachable moment in a young person's life. That moment when they're caught with a knife, everyone should swoop in and understand why they're carrying that knife. Yeah. Is it because they're going to do something out of revenge? Is it because they're scared? Is it because they're part of a gang and they're being bullied or groomed in some way? What are the reasons why they're carrying that knife? That is a point where action needs to be taken within days. The statistics will tell you it's taking far too long to deal with knife offenders.
And we know a huge number. I mean, I think the majority of youngsters caught carrying knives aren't sent to jail, aren't actually properly punished, as we've been promised time and again by every single politician under the sun. And this brings us back to Axel Rudikabana, the fact that he admitted carrying a knife on 10 occasions. He once stopped on a bus by police carrying a knife. Nothing happened. No proper punishment for that, and then he was free on the streets to do what he did. In terms of what the government has announced, as I say, let's make it a bit harder for someone to order some knives online from Amazon if they're 10 days out from their 18th birthday, for goodness sake. And that talks about taking down some, tackling social media and some of the horrific violence that we see on social media and available on the internet. Does that even touch the sides of what needs to be done, given the obvious multi-agency failure to make sure that Axel Rudikabana was not going to be able to carry out the killing that he did?
Making it harder for young people to get knives, and particularly some of the really deadly weapons online,
the massive big
one
machetes.
Thing that has to be done. Okay, it's not the answer. It's one approach. Dealing with the tech firms and getting them to take down some of the violent material, it's another aspect of it. But of course, it's not going to do. It's not going to do the job completely. Of course it isn't, because if you're a young person, you want to get hold of a knife, of course you can. You can go to a kitchen and get hold of one. So the failures in this case, we don't know about the parents' involvement and how much they really tried to get help. It seems as though they did to some point, but did they turn a blind eye? Yeah. Were they not curious enough? Were they scared of their teenage son? That's a possibility as well. What help was provided to them? Those are questions we don't have the answers to. The agencies, I fear that he was passed from one agency to another because he just didn't fit into one particular box.
And he didn't engage, apparently, so at which point they just don't bother carrying on. I mean, those are the very people you need to engage with.
In this, that I don't think the police were talking to the counter-terrorism police. I don't think the information was shared there. And I do think that the police probably stepped back when they shouldn't have done, when they should really have gone in harder, particularly when he was found for a second time with a knife. That was the second occasion, being convicted once of a knife crime, second occasion. That really is the moment to swoop in and take some tough action. Because if you do get a young person into the criminal justice system, you can take action. You can search their property, right?
Yeah.
You can start questioning those around them. You can put some conditions on what they do. Unless you get someone into the system and do that, it's very, very difficult.
Absolutely. And yet,
to rely on their
and this is the frustration for so many people. And my God, the heart-wrenching awfulness that the families in Southport have had to live with is that while police were failing to take action against a youngster who'd called Childline and said, I want to kill people at my school, I want to kill, who had a knife, been caught with it repeatedly, who made threats, he was obsessed with genocide and the like. I mean, the signs were bright red and they were neon and they were flashing for years. And yet police seem to be worried about, hurty words on Twitter and the like. And we know now Bedfordshire Police and Hertfordshire and Cambridgeshire Police, they've created a diversity, equality and inclusion reference guide for their officers and staff. This is what they spend their time doing. A 9-page document published online. And basically it's telling police not to use terms like black sheep or blacklisted in case it causes offence. You can't even say that someone should get a black mark against their name because that itself is using the word black in a negative way. Also told to use gender-neutral language, like talking about pregnant person rather than a pregnant woman, because there are no other people other than pregnant women, and the like. And just basically, saying there are more than 2 gender identities and realities. All of this stuff, this is the worry people have, that police spend too much time with this madness, policing words, too much time wearing rainbow lanyards at pride festivals, rather than, protecting us from the lunatics, the madmen and the bad men who are actually going to harm us and our children.
Well, let's not get carried away. This was a guide that I think is really ill-conceived. And Festus Akinbusoye, who's the former black Police and Crime Commissioner of Bedfordshire himself, has raised questions about it. And this was produced by the force that he used to lead. But that's not to say, Julia, that police aren't out there doing a hard job. I would imagine most police officers will see this. They'll probably kind of roll their eyes, roll their eyeballs, and
they'll probably be sent on a training course about it, wasting their time instead of policing.
I do think it's extraudinary, I have to say.
No, I don't think it is. I think it's just the norm now, and that's what we'd like. Trumpian policies to get rid of. This is the norm in private companies as well as the public sector, let alone policing now. Danny Shaw, we'll have to leave that. So appreciate your thoughts on all of this.